Hey guys! Today I'm going to be doing a craft hoard video. Sorry if you hear my cats, they just started cleaning each other. Of course, because I'm filming, they decided to start making noise. Anyway, today I'm going to be doing a craft hoard video. This is actually kind of a redo of a project that I tried to do a while ago. I didn't post it, and I think I may have mentioned it slightly in another video, but yeah. I mentioned in like 1 or 2 videos that I've actually started the process of getting my teeth straightened through Invisalign, and I wanted a nice little traveling like carrying case thing for all of the things that I need for it. They actually give you a little case to keep your trays in when you have them out, which is really nice. I also want to get one of those like little foldable toothbrushes and then like a small thing of like toothpaste, floss. It would be nice if I could keep all of those things in one little like pack thing. So I tried to do it before. Actually, here it is right here. It turned out really crappy. So here it is. I wanted it to like open like this so it would like lay flat when you have it on the sink or whatever. But the fabric that I used, this fabric is really flimsy and it doesn't like stay nice and like in its shape, I guess. It's kind of like, ugh, I don't know. And sewing it was kind of a pain. It just didn't turn out like how I wanted. So I wanted to revisit it at a later time. And now's the time. I actually have some gray vinyl fabric left over from my bat backpack video, and I think that stuff would be pretty perfect for this project because it, you know, since it's the vinyl fabric, it keeps its shape. So I'm going to try to do that today. This doesn't have to be like an Invisalign case. It could be for any little toiletry things for when you're traveling. Like I said, I'm going to keep like a little toothbrush and the tiny toothpaste things. After I'm done with my treatment, after I'm done with my Invisalign treatment, I'll probably use it to like hold, I don't know, hair things, bobby pins, or maybe even jewelry. Who knows? We'll see. So I'm going to go through my stuff and see if I have all the stuff I need. I probably should. I'm probably going to mostly take this thing apart and salvage material from this. But yeah, so let's go get the rest of the materials. So I gathered vinyl. I used this a few weeks ago to make my bat backpack. Fabric. I've had this stuff forever and it was too perfect not to use in this project. Some zippers, by the way of my failed case, matching thread, and elastic. First, I deconstructed my first attempt. I wanted to reuse the zippers since they were cut to size already. Initially, I was going to break it down to just 2 zippers, but last minute decided to leave the small inner zipper connected to this other fabric that would make up the inner wall. The way I sewed on the fabric is pretty much exactly how I'll sew the fabric onto the longer zipper later in this video. Anyway, once this was all taken apart, I cut all of my fabric pieces. Just a forewarning, I'm going to tell you how I cut each piece initially, but then I end up altering a few of them, so I'll put the final measurements of everything in the description box down below. All these measurements include the seam allowance as well. For the vinyl fabric, I cut 2 3.5 by 4 inch pieces. I accidentally marked them without adding the seam allowance, but thankfully I remembered before cutting them out. I redrew the bigger measurements in blue so that I wouldn't get confused later on. 2 14 by 1.5 inch pieces, 1 2.5 by 2 inch piece, and 1 2 inch by about 4 inch piece. And with the other fabric, I basically did the same cuts, save for the last one. 2 3.5 by 4 inch pieces, 2 14 by 1.5 inch pieces, and 1 2.5 by 2 inch piece. I marked down the middle of the 2 by 4 inch piece, and then spread some contact cement all over. I set that aside for a bit, and then I folded the sides in, matching the edges to the middle line. But at first, I didn't wait as long as it says to on the bottle, and so it didn't stick. It needs to get to that tacky stage, which I didn't let it get to here. So I set it aside again for about 15 minutes, like the bottle says, and then this time it worked. Now onto the zipper. I laid the zipper right side down onto one of the long vinyl pieces, matching up the top edge like so. Then I laid one of the long fabric pieces on top, right side down. I used a binder clip to keep them all lined up on the edge. Normally I would like to use more binder clips, but I keep losing them. And of course, towards the end of this project, when I didn't need them anymore, I found my big bag of them, so that's cool. Anyway, I sewed along the top edge using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And actually, that's the seam allowance that I use for this whole project. And most sewing projects, really. I flipped the fabric right sides out and then sewed a top stitch along the edge of the fabric to keep it pressed down the right way. And then I repeated that for the other side. The whole zipper piece ended up being wider than I needed it to be, so I trimmed about 1/4 of an inch off each side. Here I'm messing with how I want the loop to be. I settled with wanting it to stretch across this small piece of vinyl, but I didn't want it to stick out like crazy, so I trimmed it down to about 3 inches. On one end of the zipper, I laid the strap loop bit in the middle, seam side up, and then laid the 2.5 by 2 inch piece on, right sides down, and then sewed along the edge. And then to get it to lay flat, I sewed a top stitch, but only along here and here. I test fitted around one of the square pieces and found that it was going to be too long, so I trimmed the vinyl piece back about 1/4 of an inch. Then I cut about 1/2 an inch off of the other side of the zipper. Then I matched that end to the other end of the zipper, right sides touching, making sure to push the strap loop piece to be flush with the edge. And then I sewed it along the edge. And then I top stitched along the top and bottom, just like I did on the other side. And then I hand sewed the matching fabric piece onto the other side of the small vinyl, folding the edges in, like so. I took the 4 by 3.5 inch pieces of vinyl and fabric and put them together, wrong sides touching, and then I sewed around the edge about 1/8 of an inch in. This is just to hold everything in place. You'll probably notice that I cut notches out of the corners of the vinyl fabric. After I sewed the pieces together, I cut the excess fabric away and then cut the same notches in the corners of the fabric. I marked the midpoints of the top and the bottom piece, as well as the zipper piece, and then I lined the pieces up, vinyl sides together. Normally I'd use binder clips to hold all of these edges together, but like I mentioned before, I had misplaced them, so instead I just did a quick stitch at the midpoints and then also on the corners. And actually this probably worked better than if I had used the clips. Then I sewed along the edge. I snipped a bit off each corner, making sure not to cut into the seam, and then I repeated this on the other side. Right before sewing, I remembered to unzip this thing. If you don't unzip it, it's almost impossible to flip right sides out. You'll end up trying to unzip the zipper from the wrong side, and it takes forever. But anyway, once that's all sewn up, I wanted to cover the raw edges, so I decided to make some bias tape. It's pretty easy to make. I just hate doing it because it uses a bunch of the fabric since you have to cut it at an angle. It's kind of hard to see what I'm doing here because my camera was zoomed in too much, but I'll add some quick graphics that hopefully help out. Lay your fabric out. Fold the corner of your fabric down like so. Then take the other corner and fold it up. And now you're ready to cut. This is easiest with a ruler and a rolling cutter. If you only have scissors, I suggest pinning along the edge so the fabric doesn't slip around as you cut. Anyway, for this first cut, since this edge is folded, you'll need to have the measurement that you're going for. If you're aiming for a 1-inch strip, then make this first cut 1/2 an inch. And then if you need more bias tape, keep cutting along this edge, but since it's now a cut edge, then use the full measurement. I did this first cut at the full measurement, so I had to go back and cut it in half. So an easy way to fold and iron bias tape, if you don't have a bias tape maker, is to measure out the final size of tape you want. Typically, that's like half the size of the strip. Mark like so, and then stick a pin in, a little outside of the mark, then out through the mark, and then back into the other mark, and then out a little bit outside of that mark. Does that make sense? Basically, you want however big you want your bias tape to be the exposed needle in the middle. It'll make sense in a sec. Take your strip, fold the edges in, and then pull it through under the needle. You may need to use another needle or pin to help you get it under enough for you to start pulling it through. As you pull, the edges will follow the edge that's already been pulled through, and it will fold over. Iron the fabric as you pull it through. The goal is to have the edges fold in and meet in the middle. I found that keeping my thumb or a finger in the middle of the strip before it gets pulled in helps the edges fold in correctly. It still takes a bit of time because you have to pull slowly to make sure everything's folding in correctly, but once you have a rhythm, it's way better than having to sit there and try to fold it up on your own. Eventually I got to the point where I just left my iron sitting at the base of the pin and I slowly pulled the fabric through. The only reason I felt confident enough to do this is because this tiny baby iron kind of sucks. It gets hot enough to iron creases into the fabric, but it won't burn fabric if I leave it sitting like this. At least, not for how long I was leaving it set like that. So if your iron is more high powered than mine, then be careful. Anyway, I continued this process and made 2 long pieces of bias tape, and then I realized that I made them too thin. So I just repeated the process, this time cutting a strip that was 1.5 inches wide, which then made a piece of bias tape that was 3/4 of an inch wide. Once that was done, I hand sewed it onto the case, wrapping it around the raw edges. Then I cut the inner zipper piece down to 3 3/4 by 3.5 inches. I folded the edges 1/4 of an inch in, pinned them down, and then pinned this in the case, and then I hand sewed it in. Lastly, I cut a piece of elastic to size. I believe I cut it to 4.5 inches. I folded the edges in twice, and then stitched them down with the sewing machine, and then I hand sewed them in on the other side of the case at the halfway point. And then it's done. Although I do have a few issues with this one, it is way better than my initial attempt. I'll probably actually use this thing. My main issue is that it doesn't lay flat when you have it open. That's the one thing that I was going for in this design, but the loop that I added kind of hinders that. So that kind of sucks, but whatever. Another issue is that I made it a bit too small to comfortably fit the folding toothbrush and toothpaste that I initially wanted. I mean, it fits diagonally, but it's tough to put it in the zippered side. I guess it's probably doable to just slip it under the elastic with the case and have it like that, but I don't know. I'll probably just try to find a smaller travel toothbrush to leave in there. I'm sure there are other kinds that'll work. Thankfully, it does fit these floss things, which are also important to keep in this Invisalign kit thing. But anyway, beside those 2 things, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. If you're interested in buying any of my artwork, don't forget to go check out my store. I have prints and originals up there. There's also a pre-order for this year's Inktober book if you're interested. If you order within the pre-order time period, you'll get $5 off the price of the book. This will be available until November 19th, 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And also, all of my Inktober 2016 stuff is 25% off, so go check it out. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. If you did, please leave a like. If you want to see more, then feel free to subscribe. I post art videos every Tuesday and DIY videos every Thursday. You can follow me on Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, Pinterest, Snapchat, and Twitch, and I'll leave the information to all of those down below. Thank you to my patrons for helping me produce this video. If you are interested, then I'll leave a link to mine right up here and you can go check it out. If you have any questions or suggestions for future videos, please leave a comment down below, and I'll see you next week.